It's one of the most basic principles of map reading. Maps tend to be in true north. And if you're using a magnetic compass, it doesn't point true north, it points magnetic north. And the deviation between the two of those varies depending on where you are in the world. In this place, it's approximately 10 degrees. So they've suggested to me that the NTSB may have forgotten about that, and this is why the aircraft is approaching the building from approximately 10 to 15 degrees, the wrong angle. Well, if you think about it, that's quite absurd, because if I rotate the ground map by 10 degrees, suddenly we are taking off several miles away from the airfield. Similarly, if I rotate the flight path, we are landing several miles away from the Pentagon, so it's patently absurd to suggest that we can rotate the ground map in order to correct this. And this is a pattern which you'll find with this file. It's filled with so many errors, each of which can be corrected, but having done so will give you another 10 errors because you've thrown various other parameters completely out. This is another error that the NTSB, for reasons known only to themselves, have refused to make any comment on. Now I've just taken the plane one frame back. You can see the road quite a lot better there. And these light poles, the first one is situated here, another one here and back and so forth like that. So the plane really is nowhere near the required position. And I hope you can see that. The yellow line and the box there, the picture I've attempted to make from the position you see in the animation. The yellow line and the plane I've superimposed there show you the course one would have to fly in order to hit the light poles and pass through the hole in the front of the building. And it is deviates from that shown in the animation by a considerable margin. Again, this is another screenshot showing you another inconsistency. In the last frame, the altitude is noted as 173 feet. That's pressure altitude, which is by air pressure, above sea level. And the poles are approximately 40 feet tall. Ground elevation at the Pentagon, which is how far the ground there is above sea level, is 40 feet. So if we add 40 and 40, we don't have 173 by quite a large margin. So then we have a problem. Even if we correct the heading, the plane is above the light poles by quite a distance. So it's still incapable of causing the physical damage that was photographed in the day. And it was then suggested to me that since this is pressure altitude, which is calculated via air pressure, that this could be incorrect due to calibration or lag caused because you're descending. And this was perfectly correct in that there was a possibility the pressure altitude could have been wrong. Now these red light poles there, you can see these are the ones knocked over, and they correlate very well to the wingspan of a 757-200. And it makes it very useful because we can see the exact path to within 2 degrees the plane would have to have flown, because if you deviate from that even 2 degrees, the wing will miss one of the poles. There's a very, very narrow angle of approach you need to hit all poles over. Also, the point of note here, these poles are approximately several hundred meters away from the face of the Pentagon. Now this aircraft would have to be flying about 20 or 30 feet above the ground, approximately half a kilometre away from the Pentagon. Bear that in mind. Now, what we realised then is that we needed to get to the raw data to see what precisely had gone on, because this animation is created from the raw black box data of the aircraft, and we can't be sure what happened to it in between, or if perhaps the software operator had made a mistake or similar. So a research colleague of mine in the States put another Freedom of Information Act request in and managed to obtain from the NTSB the raw flight data recorder file, which is a .fdr file, and it's about 25 megabytes. And we were later told by the NTSB that we'd been provided with this file mistakenly and that we should not have been sent it, which is quite interesting. But I'm sure from the NTSB's point of view they weren't too concerned about this, because there are a very small number of companies in the world who are able to decode a flight data recorder file. It's encoded specially. The only companies with the software able to read it are places like Boeing, military and major airlines. So the chances of a member of the public being able to decode the file is about, well, you can make up any number you like really, but it's 1,000,000 to 1. So what we decided to do was start phoning up flight data recorder companies and asking them to decode the file for us. Again, this is the problem. Only very few companies have the software, and if you phone up the military and ask to do this sort of thing, you're not likely to get a positive response. The other problem was you need a file called the data frame layout. Now, at this stage, we decided, because we have a few computer experts in our team, to try and break into this file ourselves. Because if we broke into the file, it's the raw data from the aircraft. It's not dependent on any software. You'd be able to see precisely what happened to this aeroplane from the raw data. So it was absolutely imperative that we were able to read it. So to do this ourselves, you need a data frame layout, because basically the data recorded by the black box is being recorded in a stream of ones and zeros. There are several hundred sensors, and they're being recorded one after the other. If you don't know the order they've been recorded in, there's no point even being able to decode the numbers, because they could be anything. The other problem being, Boeing are the only company who have this file, because Boeing make the aircraft. But we had contacted several flight data recorder companies. One of them I contacted was very sympathetic, and one of their senior staff emailed me the data frame layout. He said his boss had prohibited him from directly assisting me in investigating this, but he would provide me this file to do it myself under the agreement that his name on their company were never ever mentioned by me to anybody after that period in time. It's a company that I had contacted previously, and they had agreed to decode the file because I had neglected to tell them which plane it was from. It was slightly forgetful of me. But they rapidly discovered which plane it was from, and I received a phone call from the managing director of the company on 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday. And he said, could you confirm the flight number of this plane, please, sir? I said, yes, it's American Airlines, Flight 77. He said, I'm terribly sorry. This company is no longer in a position to assist you with your inquiries. Goodbye. And this is a pattern repeated. Nobody in the industry will touch this file with a barge pole. They will not have anything to do with it. Now, you can make up your own minds as to why that might be. We tried and failed to decode the file by ourselves. There's a lot of reasons for this, the chief one being it's almost impossible. Fortunately, a major flight data recorder company in the United States sent an email to one of my research colleagues and said, I'm going to be in a city near you for a flight data recorder conference in a week. Meet me in the hotel room in the lobby and bring the file. So we were getting slightly concerned at this point. We were all having visions of him turning up in the car park in a black sedan with men in suits stepping out when he turned up. So we managed to get a photograph of the man he was meeting and gave him the photograph and said, for God's sake, make sure he looks like this when you turn up at the hotel. Fortunately, he did. And they met in the hotel room. He gave him the CD. He decoded the file. It took about 20 minutes. He gave him the CD back and then said, by the way, what do you want to do with this? So they had a brief chat about the research he was involved in. And he said, well, that's very interesting, but of course you understand you mustn't ever tell anyone I met you here. I'm afraid, I know the names of all these companies, but I'm afraid I can't tell you. People will lose their jobs. So we had the decode of the raw file. It was a bit of an anticlimax because when we got it, we had a Microsoft Excel sheet with about 3.5 million cells in it. So it's not a case of just looking at it and having an epiphany and suddenly realising precisely what happened. It took months of research, of looking through numbers to try and see what really happened to the plane. But very briefly, we went into the file and we had radar altitude, which had been omitted by the NTSB in the file they sent us for reasons known only to themselves.